Welcome to the Next ChaptHER podcast, a place where women like you rediscover their most fulfilled selves, beyond and within motherhood. Meet your host, Andrea Hecht, life and purpose coach for busy moms, educator, and mother of two. This is a podcast where we explore what it means to reclaim ownership of your time, well-being, and personal identity outside motherhood. Join Andrea for deep conversations with inspirational women as we find out what it means to feel lit up by your life again, both as a mom and as an individual. From rediscovering your authentic ambitions and reigniting your passions to ditching the mom guilt and putting your needs first, each episode will motivate you to write the next chapter on your own terms. So get ready to create the inner identity and outer lifestyle that will empower you to live your most joyful and fulfilling life, both inside and outside the home. Let's dive in.
Another episode of the Next Chapter podcast. I'm very excited to welcome my very first Canadian guest, Jodi. And it's really exciting to share how Jodi and I connected because we have a lot of people in common, but we hadn't met before. And we are both in this wonderful marketing networking group. And as it turns out, Jodi went to a camp near my hometown, and she was very close friends with one of my high school friends and also someone that I went to camp with. So it's very interesting how she lives in Canada, and I live in New Jersey, but we really were connected way before we actually met. What was it? Maybe a couple months ago. So welcome, Jodi. I'm excited to have you as part of the Next Chapter community and have you share your journey with the listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to be here and jump into this chat.
Thank you. So I always like to, before I start a conversation, I always like to go back to someone's kind of childhood, because I think in moments when people are stuck, they're not sure what they want to do. They're not sure what their passions are, what their interests are. I think we can sometimes pull on what we enjoyed as a child. So I'm curious, what type of activity did you really enjoy when you were a child?
It's kind of, I don't know if it's concerning or normal or just a discussion point that I don't remember a ton of my childhood. Like I remember when I see pictures, it brings back memories. I was a gymnast when you ask about activities. So that I remember. I did competitive gymnastics. So that was probably my biggest passion as a child.
And how did that kind of lead into any of your movement activity now as an adult? Are you a gymnast? Can you still do a cartwheel? Because full disclosure, I can't do a cartwheel. I cannot for the life of me. I think I was just afraid to flip upside down. I can't do a cartwheel.
It's funny. I was working out the other day, my gym, and I was about to try a cartwheel, but I think about maybe like 10 years ago, I had the idea of maybe going back to gymnastics, but if I do a cartwheel, I see stars now. So that ship has long ago sailed, and I'm probably way too old. Although I do see like 90-year-old women on TikTok doing gymnastics. So
yeah, it is very interesting how some of the things that we did in our childhood, that we either some of them stick with us or some do not. And so I kind of want to, before we talk about, I thought that we would focus kind of the conversation about how as mothers, we really nourish ourselves. But before we get into that, I'd like to let me step back for a moment. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'd like to focus a little bit on your background. And if you could highlight kind of the pivotal moments that brought you to where you are today.
In terms of
work and also weaving in motherhood. So kind of your general.
I have 3 boys. So they're almost 15, almost 17 and 19. And as I was having kids, I had a very stable job where I worked. I'm an occupational therapist by background. And I worked for the government when I had all my kids. As a case manager. And I think it was just a very comfortable job because it paid the bills. It taught me up, gave me a year off after each baby.
Wow.
But it didn't necessarily speak to my purpose. And I sort of feel maybe after each each maternity leave, I sort of questioned what I wanted to do with my life. And in 2018, I got certified as a eating psychology coach through the Institute for the Psychology of Eating. And sort of that's my side gig. And then I still do case management. I work with people who have been in motor vehicle accidents and just sort of put all their rehab together. I'm the liaison between the insurance company and the lawyers. So I wear a few different hats in my work life.
That's very interesting that you said, kind of during the different maternity leaves that you were able to step back and reflect. And I think that that's a very powerful quality, because so many of us kind of just go through the motions and don't take that moment to kind of step back and reflect. And also you mentioned that, the work that you were doing might not have served as your purpose. And can you kind of speak a little bit more to that?
I feel like as we're in the thick of raising kids, like that is our purpose. And it's sort of go, 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 like just meeting their needs. And often our needs get pushed to the side, or we forget who we are aside from being mothers. So yeah, I think there's just not the space to even reflect on that in the early years. So I think as my kids get older, and now I'm in another stage where 2 of my kids are out of the house. So then it causes another what's the purpose of my life now? So I think there's various stages where we are almost forced to reflect because life circumstances change so much.
100%. And I always like to say that there's kind of seasons to, a year, but then also to our journey. And like you said, once before motherhood, a lot of the focus could have been on us and our professional development and our needs. And then when you throw children into the mix, then there is that new season, that new shift, and we're trying to balance our needs with our children's. But when they're younger, we always focus on them because they demand. And then when you add another baby and then another baby, kind of we get pushed to the back burner. And so it's understandable that at those different points that we can be reflecting. And sometimes once they go to school, the preschool moment, it's like, oh, wow, now I have these few hours to be able to fill with something that fills my bucket. Or then when they go to elementary school, or when you said they're leaving the house, they end up being able to reflect on those different parts. So as far as nourishing kind of yourself, what does that look like for you in your life? How do you nourish yourself?
I think as I started my own, what I would say a healing journey, I realized I crave connection a lot. And of course, a huge part of my journey was during COVID when in-person connection wasn't possible. So I find any gatherings with a group of women is super powerful and nourishing. Movement's really important to me. I love my Peloton and the whole Peloton app, all the different workouts. I have a Monday yoga class. I have a love-hate relationship with yoga. I do enjoy it, but I can never actually commit to it. Whereas I have no problem committing to a strength workout, but I've been very trying to keep it in my schedule every Monday. I have a class that I go to. I nourish myself. I drink my water. I need my sleep. I've always needed a lot of sleep. My husband and I used to argue when we were first dating because I'd be like, yeah, I need to go to bed. And he's like, you can sleep when you're dead. But so I'm very mindful of getting my 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, getting outside. And yeah.
It's important though, because again, as we said, with mothers, it's very easy not to focus on ourselves because either we push the time that we have to dedicate to our children, or sometimes we feel guilty when we're kind of nourishing ourselves and not using that time for others. So I'm curious if that guilt has ever crept up for you.
Oh yes. Guilt is my middle name. I am always feeling guilty about something, but I think with 2 kids out of the house and a teenager who wants very little to do with me. Nobody really needs me for big bulks of the day anymore. So that part of the guilt is gone, but it still comes up in other ways. Like my husband and I went on Sunday to watch my son play, actually in Michigan, for the day. But my younger son didn't want to come. So I felt guilty that he was at home for 12 hours by himself. Whereas he said, I actually like to be alone. So yeah, no, the guilt never goes away.
It's so interesting because it's like, okay, where is the guilt coming from? Is it coming from external? Is it coming from internal, like our own expectations? Is it, kind of like the external societal pressures, or probably, I would think, kind of like a combination of both. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure for everyone, it's for different reasons. I can probably trace mine back to my childhood in certain ways. So yeah, but I'm sure for everyone, it comes up in different ways for different reasons.
Yeah. And that is a big thing. And so that goes back to, again, then the lack of nourishment for ourselves. But it sounds like for you in particular, you're very intentional with, like you said, scheduling your Monday, classes, or making sure that you get on the bike. I know before we both got, hit record, we were talking about how, we're, for the listeners, you're probably going to be listening to the audio, maybe not seeing the video, but that we're professional on top and workout bottoms on the bottom, because we know that after this call that both of us wanted to take some time to move our bodies. So it's really getting intentional with that. And then
definitely.
I saw you posted today on Instagram a really powerful post about finding kind of pleasure in movement. And so can you share a little bit more about that experience when you ran the race and why that's so powerful for people to consider something like that? Maybe not necessarily the race, but why it's so important to find pleasure in different things.
I think just in the pace of our society, where a lot of us are on autopilot and just trying to finish our to-do list, and we're not carving in the time for pleasure. And then in the work that I do with around binge eating and emotional eating, a lot of people use food as their only source of pleasure. So you're running through the day, not tuning into what you need. And then at the end of the day, you're binging on chocolate or whatever it might be. So I think it's important to, schedule in some pleasure for me, like the post you're referring to. I never was a runner, but then I started to do these organized races, and it was, even though I would finish close to the end of the pack, it was still just a high just to go with a friend, and to just the being around so many people, like thousands of people, you just feel like part of something. And I think a lot of us we don't have enough pleasure or play like as we did as children. So it impacts mood. And like I said, in the work I do, it just has us relying on some vices that we may not want to be relying on.
100%. And I think, like you said, it goes back to kind of like that childhood spirit that so many of us kind of lose because we are dedicated. Some of us are, uber focused on our work. Some of us are uber focused on our children. Some of us are trying to find that balance or integration of both of them. So, it's important to find that pleasure piece as well. And so can you kind of speak a little bit to the work that you are, now doing? I know you said you have it's a food psychology background, because I think that that's very interesting and very different than some of the other, kind of health wellness practices out there. So can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, it's called like my I can never say the word certification is as an eating psychology coach or a mind-body eating coach. And it just sort of looks at some mind-body eating factors, such as like more what a dietitian or a nutritionist might focus on, like how, like your eating rhythm, like are you eating more of your calories at the end of the day? How are you balancing your macronutrients? Your eating speed, like things like that. But then there's a whole other dynamic psychology piece to what I do, where we're actually looking at your family of origin and your work satisfaction and your environment, because often for people who have issues around food, it's about the food, but it's not. There's often a lot more beyond that other, like a traditional nutritionist might not touch on. So,
right. I think that that's so fascinating because, like you said, it may be a traditional, when you think of seeing someone about kind of the challenges you have around food, a lot of times you might think that it is, right, how many calories should I be having? What types of food should I be eating? How many, what time, and all of that. But like you said, there is so much underneath all of that.
I think people with disordered eating patterns need someone like me. I mean, for the rest of the population, then, and I'm not knocking a nutritionist or a dietitian because they're invaluable.
Right.
But for the people that have much deeper issues, I think they need an approach that looks at all the factors.
100%. I think it just is, we're not like a human and compartmentalize everything, that we're like one whole person. And it sounds like you take a very holistic approach to someone's eating and what is underneath that. And so I think that that is extremely powerful, to be able to see someone and to be able to get to the bottom of what is causing someone, like you said, to have that kind of disordered eating patterns and why they might be choosing to do something when it has nothing to do with food, that it has, the trigger is something so much greater than that. And if you don't take that time to explore it, then it can continue to be some kind of, cycle. So that's really powerful.
Yeah. And I think we all have something, whether it's food, whether it's shopping, whether it's scrolling on Instagram. Like, everybody has a way of coping with tough emotions or numbing their emotions. So another piece of my work is really, and it's something I'm still working on myself, right, is to really learn to identify your emotions and just be with them instead of trying to run away from them, because it's hard to feel. We're not taught how to feel.
100%. And I appreciate that you said that we're not taught to feel, because I think that goes right back to, kind of childhood. Like, as a parent, you don't want to see your child, many people don't like to see their child cry. So the immediate thing to do is, what can we do to settle that? What can we do? They must be so upset. Or the kid goes to a birthday party and gets the red balloon and they want the pink balloon. So then you're up there trying to negotiate. Well, Johnny wanted, the pink balloon, and not allowing our children to sit with the discomfort, the emotions. And so if we're doing that to our own children, it's obviously been like some kind of cycle. And so, like you said, we're trying to find our numbing factors. And so
exactly.
And it can become, kind of a problem for sure.
Exactly. Especially when you're talking about how we are with our kids. Like, we don't teach our kids how to sit with anger. Like, if your kid's having a temper tantrum, you don't want to sit and talk to them about what they're feeling. You want it to stop, like, right away.
Right.
So in adulthood, when we have that anger or frustration, like, we just don't know what to do with it. And bringing food back, like, how often do you say, oh, okay, you're upset, let's go for ice cream? Or like, you leave a dentist office, they give you, or not, maybe not the dentist, but a doctor, they give you a lollipop after your needles. So
well, the dentist, they might not give you necessarily food, but I know our dentist gives little prizes. So it's like that. What can we do to soothe that feeling immediately for someone? So,
exactly.
I thought of something. I think I read somewhere the other day how, even when someone does like a kind gesture, going back to like sitting with emotions, when someone does a kind gesture, that a lot of people's immediate reaction is to say, I owe you one, rather than a simple thank you, sitting with that feeling that someone actually did something like nice for you, and feeling that level of appreciation and whatever. It's like instantly we got to kind of erase that pleasure feeling or whatever it is. So it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. And then connecting those emotions to sensations in your body. Because I know, like, I personally have had issues around food, which is what prompted me to want to help others. And I've had, like, I go for therapy, and my therapist will say, oh, where do you feel that emotion in your body? And I'm just like, what? Like, I'm pretty much cut off from the neck down. So that also feeds into eating, like, because you're not feeling anything. So you just want to eat. So I think really learning how to tune into your body is a huge piece of the work I do.
And how do you do that? Like what would that even look like for someone that might want to do that, but maybe is like afraid? Like you said, it's a scary thing sometimes to have those feelings, especially if you've tried to numb them or stuff them, suppress them, however you want to talk about it. So what does that even look like when you're working with someone?
I think it's a practice and just becoming more in tune. And they say that it takes like 90 seconds for emotion to actually go through your body. So we think like we can't possibly feel this pain or this anger, but if you just sit with it, it actually passes. So I think just practicing, and then things like meditation and breathing and yoga, like different practices that get you in your body.
And do you work with your clients also, talk to them about like journaling, anything like kind of to identify some triggers or something like that?
Yeah, I do. Like sometimes I give prompts, or I sometimes just like to encourage people to free write in the morning or even before bed, like a brain dump, just to get everything out. Yeah.
I always call it with my clients, stop, jot, and breathe, like stop for a moment. Like you said, kind of feel that in your body, jot all that, that's swirling in your brain, and then just take a moment to like breathe. And either you can do something with the list, you can tear it up, you can go back and see if there's patterns in it or something like that. But like you said, you need to be able to take that moment to kind of really pause.
Definitely.
I think also as far as nourishing ourselves, mothers, like I said, are always on kind of the go. I know sometimes, even yesterday, for example, I knew that I had so much that I wanted to get done. And I had, between the hours that my kids were at school, and I looked up and it was already like 2:00, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even eat lunch. Like I had a healthy breakfast that really kept me full. But so kind of what is it that you would suggest to the mothers out there that are not really stopping, not really taking the time to nourish ourselves? What kind of tips would you give?
I think there's a few things. I think, first of all, we just try to do too much. I know I catastrophize if I don't do all this today, but I don't know what I think is actually going to happen.
Right.
In reality, what's going to happen is I'll probably just do it tomorrow. Right. The sky is not going to fall if I don't finish my to-do list.
Right.
So I think my first suggestion would be to just have 1 to 3 things you want to get done in the day instead of 10, because the reality is you're not going to do them all and nothing's going to happen. I mean, some things are time sensitive, but
right.
Not everything. And to just schedule in those important things as an appointment. So I know for me, I tend to, I don't want to go for a walk until I do, I feel like I have to do everything first, but it should be backwards, and that walk should happen first. And then, I think whatever makes you feel good, you put it in your calendar like an appointment, and be really intentional about that.
I think that that's really helpful, because it's the intentionality of things. And I like how you said, kind of flip-flopping, putting what is pleasurable, putting what, that movement or whatever it is, kind of front-loading your schedule. So you're starting off feeling that kind of high, either through movement or doing something that you felt so pleasurable. And then also, I think mentioning kind of the time-sensitive piece is important. And I personally went and worked with this woman that I had met through my coach training process. She is, I forgot exactly what she calls herself, but kind of helping you to create less and to plan. Because I was like your traditional to-do list person, and you write every single thing down on there, and then you become overwhelmed. And she talked about kind of creating more of a plan. And like you mentioned, picking those few things out that absolutely need to get done or that you want to get done, and putting that as your plan. And then she even said one step further that I thought was very interesting is having buckets. So I have a life bucket, maybe your actual time appointments, and then maybe for me, it's like my business or something, and then being intentional with that. Have you ever done anything like that?
I like that. Yeah, I like to even think every day to do something physical for yourself, something that meets your emotional needs and something that meets like your mental health needs. So that would be similar to the buckets. And I like I also worked with a coach who on every Sunday, she would make a list of like everything that had to get done, including monotonous chores and work stuff. And then she would actually slot it into a specific time. I mean, that doesn't work for everyone. Because for someone like me, if I don't stick to my schedule, then I'm like then I'm upset with myself. So somewhere in the middle, I think is good, but definitely instead of just having a to-do list, actually knowing when you're going to do it is for sure more impactful.
100%. And I appreciate how you said that, what works for one doesn't work for everyone, and that you need to find what is comfortable for you, but being intentional about it, I think is really goes across the board. And, but I do like that, like on a Sunday, looking at the whole week. I always say that because when I'm not intentional and then I just go to sit down at my desk and I think that I have to do everything, it does. You can really like feel it. You can feel it in your body, and then it triggers a whole like almost domino effect. Like I said, like where you're not stopping, you're just sitting at your desk. You're not taking time for your movement. You're not taking proper time to maybe even drink your water. Although I try to keep, a glass at my desk, or you're not getting up, and all of that. So that is so important. So it goes back to, a question that I like to ask is kind of some of the non-negotiables in your life. What are the things that you must kind of have, do, or whatever to make Jodi keep moving forward?
I try to stick to my morning routine, and it's the type of thing where as I'm doing it, I'm like, I could take it or leave it. But then if I go a few days without it, I notice a difference. So, I do like a 10-minute calm meditation, like from the Calm app.
Oh, yes.
Daily meditation. Sometimes I'm not actually fully listening to it, but most times I am. Mm-hmm. And then I do a little bit of journaling. I have like these 3 essential oils. Like I once went to a retreat and she gave us a little ritual with these 3 oils. I do my little to-do list for the day, drink my water with this like acid thing I have from a nutritionist. Mm-hmm. And that's how I like to start my day.
And that's nice because it sounds like you're filling your so-called cup up first with the things that are important to you before you kind of put yourself out there and might have the demands of the world, your family, work, and all of that. But that you're really, like I said, nourishing yourself first. And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And again, this is stuff that's a lot easier to do as your kids are older, because I know when I had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old, there's no way I was doing all this. But even if I had a client like that, I would say, wake up 5 minutes before your kids, or put them in front of the TV for 5 minutes and just do something. Take 3 deep breaths or something, just to like center yourself and tune into yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
And just going back to what you were saying about the scheduling, another reason I liked how she did that is I think as moms, every week we're like, oh, I have to do laundry and I have to grocery shop. And there's all this dreaded list that whether we dread it or we have a plan for it, we have to do.
Right.
Like it has to get done. So I think she finds it helpful when you put it in your calendar, because then you know it's getting done.
Right. And that it's just a cycle anyways. It's part of the cycle. And, some of those grocery shopping, the laundry, all of that's just part of the cycle. And if you can schedule it in, like you said, as any other kind of appointment or thing that you're doing, then it doesn't have that deep dread feeling.
Exactly.
I know for me, while my kids are eating their breakfast, and yes, some might judge and say you should be sitting at the table with your kids while they're eating their breakfast, but they're half asleep. They're teens, and they just want that like quiet moment to themselves before they're bombarded with school and having to pay attention. So I let them be. And so once they're set and they're settled and all of that, I take my coffee and I have a certain chair in my living room that I like to just sit and kind of plan for my day. And that's like my quiet time. And sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10 minutes that I actually get. But yeah, it makes a huge difference. And on those mornings when we're really kind of running late and I can't take those 5-10 minutes of pause, you can feel it. Like you definitely can feel it when you don't fill yourself, for sure.
100%.
And so kind of as we wrap up the end of our conversation, I always like to ask the guests to share, like, as the listeners leave the conversation, what is 1, 2, 3 things that you want them to walk away knowing?
I think if there's anyone listening who struggles with disordered eating or anything around the work I do, to just always get curious instead of judgmental. I think a lot of people beat themselves up and they approach trying to change their body from a place of hate. And people talk about self-love and body acceptance, which is like a huge thing to work towards. But just, if you overeat one day, instead of getting upset with yourself, just get curious. Maybe you skip breakfast, maybe you're tired, and then just sort of gather data almost like a scientist and just like learn to make changes from that place instead of I suck, I can't do this, I'm the worst. So that would be my biggest piece of advice specific to food. And then I guess my other piece of advice is really work on like regulating your nervous system. Like I feel like we're all in a state of fight or flight. Mm-hmm. And again, if anyone's trying to lose weight, that is not the state that you're going to lose weight in, because your body's going to produce more stress hormones and you're just going to hold on to everything. And for anyone's health, we need to be more relaxed. So before eating, I take a few deep breaths. It helps with your digestion. And just in general, again, there's a sense of urgency in our life. But for most of us, most of the time, we don't, nothing's going to happen if we don't do what we think we need to do. So just slow down and calm that nervous system.
For sure, because we're always on the go. And I think that it's so powerful, like you said, to get curious and to ditch the judgment, because we are so judgmental of ourselves and what's going on. And when you started at the beginning of the conversation, you said that a lot of times it has nothing to do with, I was so bad that I, ate whatever it was, but that there are so many other underlying things going on in your life that could be triggering something. So when you get curious, then you can get to the core of what it is that's causing that discomfort and then make those powerful changes, because things aren't necessarily going to change unless you get to the root of it. And then also, exactly. Like you said, to slow down, because we are always, on the go. We're screaming at our kids in the beginning of the day, go, 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 go. So we can get on with our day. But like you said, like the sky isn't going to fall down. And unless there's an absolute emergency, then those extra few minutes, if you're late somewhere, it's not going to make or break the day. And so like taking those calm moments. I think you posted, keep going back to your posts because they're really powerful. I thought this was so interesting because this isn't something that I thought about, going back to being calm and how you said right before you eat, taking those deep breaths, but also I think you mentioned something about like what you say to yourself, like before you eat or while you're eating is so powerful. So can you just share a little bit more about that? Because I thought that was so interesting because I never really thought about it.
Yeah, if you're eating a piece of pizza and you're thinking, oh my God, I shouldn't be eating this and I'm so gross and I should go on a diet, then you're releasing those stress hormones that work against digestion. And you could also be doing the same even if you're eating like quote healthy and having a salad, but thinking, oh my God, I'm so sick of salad. Like I don't even like it. Whereas if you have that piece of pizza and you're like, oh, I'm just enjoying it. I'm not even treating myself, but I'm choosing to eat this and there's nothing wrong with that. And it actually impacts, I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but it actually does impact how we digest our food.
No, I can see that.
Have a lot of power.
Yeah, our thoughts have a ton of power. Not only, it has a ton of power in how we choose to respond to things, how we choose to react to things, how we choose to move forward, the changes that we make. And then when you apply it, like you said, to food and your everyday experience with it, it's really very interesting. And so can you share how people can get in touch with you? And then we'll definitely share it in the show notes. But how can they follow you maybe on Instagram or a website or something like that?
Yes. So as Andrea mentioned, I'm very active on Instagram.
Yes,
my handle's Just Be Coaching with Jodi, Jodi. And my website is justbecoaching.me.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate that. And thank you for sharing all your tips and information about how mothers can really stop, feel the calmness, and focus on nourishing ourselves. So thank you so much, Jodi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Next Chapter podcast. If you are ready to trade overwhelm and mom guilt for a soul-satisfying life, head to fullyinformedlife.com or at Fully Informed Life Coaching on Instagram to check out all the latest ways to work with Andrea Hecht. Andrea specializes in helping ambitious moms like you to gain the clarity, confidence, and personal insight that will empower you to show up for your authentic ambitions and transform your well-being, all while still being a rock star mom. In the meantime, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, and join us next time for another episode of the Next Chapter podcast.